I built my software company from nothing over 7 years of grueling work. When we finally landed that $2.5 million contract, I thought my life was looking up. Then my brother-in-law Jake started showing up at my office unannounced. At first, I welcomed his interest in my business, even felt proud. I had no idea he was methodically planning to take everything I had built. Before I tell you how my own family tried to steal everything I built, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that subscribe button if family drama stories help you appreciate your own normal relatives. At 32 years old, I had already experienced both success and struggle in my professional life. After working as a software engineer for nearly a decade at a major tech firm, I decided to take the leap into entrepreneurship. The stability and comfortable six-figure salary vanished overnight as I poured my savings into starting my own software development company. My living room became my office, and my laptop became my lifeline to potential clients. For the first 2 years, I worked 80 hours a week, often forgetting to eat or sleep. My wife, Sophia, was my rock during this time. She never complained when we had to cancel vacations or when I missed family gatherings because of work deadlines. She understood my vision and supported me even when we had to cut back on expenses and live on a tight budget. Sophia worked as a high school science teacher, and her steady income kept us afloat while my business was finding its footing. My in-laws, the Reynolds family, were another story entirely. They were traditional people who valued family gatherings, steady jobs, and predictable lives. Mr. Reynolds had worked for the same manufacturing company for 35 years before retiring with a generous pension. Mrs. Reynolds had been a homemaker who prided herself on keeping a perfect house and raising successful children. They never quite understood why I would leave a stable job to start something risky. During family dinners, there were always subtle comments about how entrepreneurs often fail, how I should be thinking about starting a family instead of a business, and how Sophia deserved security that I was not providing. Then there was Jake, my brother-in-law. At 40 years old, Jake had never stayed at one job for more than 2 years. He had bounced between sales positions, management roles, and even tried his hand at real estate, never finding the success he believed he deserved. Jake was charming and confident, always talking about his next big opportunity, but the results never seemed to match his promises. Whenever my business hit a rough patch, Jake would be the first to offer unsolicited advice with a hint of condescension. When I mentioned losing a potential client, he would say things like, "I know a guy who could have closed that deal for you," or "Maybe this whole software thing is not your calling, Victor." Despite this, I always tried to maintain a good relationship with him. He was family after all, and Sophia adored her older brother. She often told me how Jake had protected her when they were kids, and how she looked up to him. I respected their bond, even if I found Jake difficult to deal with at times. Everything changed when my company landed a $2.5 million contract with Globetech Industries, one of the largest telecommunications companies in the country. After years of grinding networking and improving our services, we had finally broken through. This contract would not only secure our financial future, but also establish us as a serious player in the software development industry. The day after the news broke about our contract, Jake called me. His tone was different, more respectful, almost reverent. He congratulated me on the big win and suggested we meet for lunch to celebrate. During our lunch, Jake asked detailed questions about the business, how many employees I had, what our profit margins looked like, and how I planned to scale with this new contract. At the time, I was flattered by his interest. After years of dismissive comments, it felt good to have Jake finally acknowledge my success. I spoke openly about the company, explaining our business model, our team structure, and our plans for expansion. Jake listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes on his phone. That weekend, during a family dinner at my in-laws' house, Mr. Reynolds raised a toast to my success. It was the first time he had publicly acknowledged my business achievements, and I felt a surge of pride. Maybe I had finally proven myself to them. Jake announced to everyone that he had visited my office and was impressed by what he saw. The whole family seemed proud, and for once, I felt fully accepted by the Reynolds clan. As the evening progressed, Jake pulled me aside and expressed interest in seeing more of my operation. He mentioned that with his sales experience, he might have some valuable insights to offer. Eager to maintain this newfound respect, I invited him to visit the office again the following week. When Jake showed up at my office, I introduced him to my team of 15 employees. I showed him our development floor, our meeting rooms, and even gave him a brief overview of our project management system. The employees were polite but slightly confused about who this person was and why he was getting such a detailed tour. I explained that Jake was family and that I valued his business perspective. Throughout the day, Jake made suggestions about office layout, staff management, and client relations. Some of his ideas were actually insightful, and I found myself considering implementing a few of them. It felt like we were finally developing a positive relationship based on mutual respect. Before he left, Jake asked if he could sit in on a team meeting scheduled for the next day. I agreed, thinking it would be good for him to see how we operated. Looking back, this was where I made my first major mistake. I had opened the door just a crack, but it was enough for Jake to wedge his foot in. The family gathering that weekend took an unexpected turn. As we all sat around the dinner table, Jake suddenly announced that he had been thinking about my business and believed he could bring significant value to the company. He suggested that perhaps we could work together with his sales experience complementing my technical knowledge. The entire family turned to me, waiting for my response. Caught off guard, I mumbled something non-committal about considering the possibility. Inside, alarm bells were starting to ring, but I dismissed them. After all, this was family. What could go wrong? The following Monday, Jake showed up at my office unannounced. He was dressed in a suit that seemed a bit too formal for our casual work environment and carried a leather portfolio under his arm. He greeted my receptionist like he already worked there and walked straight into my office while I was in the middle of a call with a client. I ended my call quickly, feeling a mix of confusion and irritation. Jake sat down across from me and began talking about ideas he had for the company as if he had already joined the team. I listened, trying to be polite, but made no commitments. When he finally left 3 hours later, I felt drained and slightly uneasy. The next day, Jake returned. And the day after that, he began establishing a routine of showing up daily, often interrupting important meetings or calls. During a crucial project review with my development team, Jake interjected with his opinions contradicting my directions and suggesting alternative approaches that made little technical sense. My team exchanged uncomfortable glances. My lead developer, Marcus, who had been with me since the beginning, pulled me aside after the meeting. He expressed concern about Jake's presence and the conflicting instructions the team was receiving. I assured Marcus that Jake had no official role and that the team should continue following my direction. But I could see the damage was already being done. Uncertainty was creeping in. That evening, I decided to discuss the situation with Sophia. Over dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, I gently brought up my concerns about Jake's increasing presence at the office. To my surprise, Sophia immediately became defensive. "He is just trying to help Victor," she said. "Jake has years of business experience that could benefit your company. Plus, would it be so terrible to have family involved? We could keep the success within the family." I was taken aback by her response. It felt like she had already discussed this with Jake and had taken his side. Our conversation escalated into our first serious argument about her brother. Sophia accused me of being ungrateful for Jake's interest and expertise. I tried to explain that while I appreciated his enthusiasm, his presence was becoming disruptive. We drove home in tense silence, and the issue remained unresolved. That night, as Sophia slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I was overreacting. Maybe having Jake involved would not be so bad. Maybe I was being too protective of my company. Over the next few weeks, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Jake began forming alliances with certain employees, particularly those in sales and marketing. He would take them to lunch, have private conversations in the break room, and even meet with them after hours. A clear division started forming in my once cohesive team. I discovered that Jake had approached one of our major clients, directly bypassing me entirely. He had promised features and timelines that were simply not feasible, putting us at risk of failing to deliver. When I confronted him about this, he dismissed my concerns, saying that sometimes you need to make bold promises to keep clients excited. It does not matter if we deliver exactly what was promised as long as the client remains happy with what they get. My anxiety peaked when I found a contract addendum on my desk that I had never seen before. Jake had somehow negotiated an additional service agreement with a subcontractor, signing it with company authority he did not have. This could have created serious legal liability for the company. I immediately called my lawyer, who confirmed my fears. The document, while technically not binding without my signature as CEO, could still cause significant complications. That Sunday, during the obligatory family dinner at the Reynolds household, I decided I needed to address the issue head-on. As we sat around the dining table, I calmly explained my concerns about Jake's growing involvement in my business. Before I could finish, Mrs. Reynolds interrupted. "Jake told us how much he is helping you. He says your company has some serious organizational issues that he is fixing." I was stunned. Jake had been reporting back to the family, painting himself as some kind of savior to my supposedly struggling company. Mr. Reynolds added, "You should be grateful for his help, Victor. Jake has always had a knack for business that you computer types lack." Jake smiled confidently and then dropped a bombshell. "Actually, I have been working on a proposal for restructuring Victor's company. I think we could really take it to the next level with some changes." He pulled out a folder and spread documents across the dinner table. It was a complete business plan that positioned him as the new CEO, with me relegated to Chief Technical Officer. The plan involved bringing in Mrs. Reynolds as office manager and Mr. Reynolds as a consultant. "Family comes first," Jake said with a self-assured smile. "This is what families do. They support each other and share success. We can turn your small operation into something much bigger with our collective expertise." I looked around the table in disbelief. Sophia looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Her parents nodded in approval at Jake's plan. I felt completely blindsided and alone. "Do not be selfish," Victor, Mrs. Reynolds said when she noticed my hesitation. "This is about building something together as a family." "Mr. Reynolds added, "You have done well on your own, but imagine what you could accomplish with our help. This is what successful family businesses do." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I barely spoke as Jake continued to outline his vision for my company. My company that I had built from nothing while he had bounced from job to job, never committing to anything long-term. Now he wanted to swoop in and take control just as it was becoming successful. On the drive home, Sophia finally broke her silence. "They mean well, Victor. Maybe having Jake involved would not be such a bad thing. He does have connections that could help us grow." I could not believe what I was hearing. Us. When had my business become our business? I had spent years building this company while Sophia had supported me emotionally, but had never expressed interest in being involved. Now suddenly the entire Reynolds family wanted a piece of the pie. The next day I discovered that Jake had been meeting with potential investors behind my back. A friend in the industry called to ask about the pitch meeting Jake had arranged for the following week, a meeting I knew nothing about. Jake was planning to present my company to venture capitalists with his new organizational structure already in place. That afternoon I confronted Jake in my office. I made it clear that he had no legal right to represent my company, make promises to clients, or meet with investors. I told him his presence was no longer welcome at the office and that he needed to stop interfering in my business. Jake laughed dismissively. "You are in over your head, Victor. This contract with Globetech is just the beginning, and you need experienced business people to help you manage the growth. You are a tech guy, not a CEO. Be smart and let those of us with real business acumen take the wheel." The conversation quickly escalated into a shouting match. Several employees overheard the confrontation, adding to the growing tension in the office. Jake finally stormed out, but not before warning me that I was making a huge mistake. That evening, my phone was flooded with text messages and calls from Sophia's family, all expressing disappointment in my ungrateful attitude and selfish behavior. The situation reached a breaking point when I discovered a document on our shared home computer. Jake had drafted legal paperwork to alter the company's ownership structure, giving himself and the Reynolds family significant equity. What shocked me most was Sophia's digital signature on some of the preliminary documents. My hands shaking, I confronted Sophia when she returned from work. I showed her the documents and asked if she understood what she had signed. Her face paled as I explained that these papers, if processed, would essentially transfer partial ownership of my company to her family without any investment or work on their part. Jake said it was just preliminary paperwork to explore options, she explained weakly. He said you had verbally agreed to bring him on as a partner. This was a complete lie. I had never agreed to any such arrangement. The betrayal cut deep not just from Jake but from my own wife. How could she sign legal documents affecting my business without discussing it with me first? The argument that followed was the worst of our marriage. Sophia accused me of being controlling and unwilling to accept help. I accused her of betraying my trust and siding with her family against me. The fight ended with Sophia packing a bag and going to stay with her parents, claiming she needed space to think. The next morning, I received a call from Mr. Reynolds. His tone was cold and threatening. "You have disappointed this family, Victor," he said. "Jake was trying to help you, and this is how you repay his generosity, by driving your own wife away. If you do not start cooperating with the family, we will take legal action. Sophia is entitled to half of everything you own, including your company." The threat sent me into a panic. I immediately called my lawyer, Angela, who had helped me establish the company years ago. She assured me that while Sophia might have some claim as my spouse Jake, and the rest of the Reynolds family had absolutely no legal right to my business. She advised me to secure all company documents, change passwords, and document every interaction with Jake and the family going forward. When I arrived at the office that day, the atmosphere was tense. Word had spread about the confrontation with Jake, and employees were whispering among themselves. I called an emergency meeting with my management team to clear the air. To my horror, I discovered that Jake had been telling employees that I was planning to sell the company to a larger firm, which would likely result in layoffs and restructuring. He had positioned himself as someone who could prevent this by taking over leadership. Several key employees, including 2 senior developers, had already given notice, believing the company was about to undergo major changes. I spent the entire day in one-on-one meetings trying to reassure my team and clarify the situation. Most seemed relieved to hear my side of the story, but the damage to morale was already done. Trust had been eroded. My next step was to contact Globetech, our major client, as I feared Jake had approached them directly, promising additional services that were not in our original contract. The client was understandably confused and concerned about who actually represented the company. I had to spend hours on the phone with their executive team explaining the situation and reassuring them that Jake had no authority to modify our agreement. With my lawyer's guidance, I decided to take decisive action. I revoked all of Jake's access credentials to the building and our systems. I sent a company-wide email clarifying that Jake had never been an employee or partner and had no authority to make decisions or commitments on behalf of the company. I instructed all employees to direct any communication from Jake or the Reynolds family to me immediately. The next day, Jake arrived at the office with Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds in tow, only to be stopped by security. I had warned the building management about the situation, and they had agreed to prevent unauthorized access to our floor. From my office window, I watched the confrontation in the parking lot. Jake was gesturing wildly, his face red with anger. Mr. Reynolds was on his phone, presumably calling me, though I had silenced my phone for the morning. Mrs. Reynolds looked mortified as other tenants of the building walked past, staring at the commotion. Eventually they left, but not before Jake spotted me watching from the window. The look of betrayal and rage on his face sent a chill down my spine. This was far from over. That afternoon, Sophia came to the office, something she rarely did. She looked torn, standing awkwardly in the reception area, until I invited her into my private office. She explained that her family was furious, that they felt I was destroying a chance to build a family legacy. But she also admitted that she was uncomfortable with how aggressive Jake had become. "I need you to choose, Sophia," I said quietly. "Either you are with me, your husband, or you are with them. There is no middle ground anymore." She left without giving me an answer, tears in her eyes. I felt my own world crumbling around me. The business I had built was in chaos, my marriage was on the rocks, and I faced hostile takeover attempts from my own family. After a sleepless night of weighing my options, I made the most difficult decision of my professional life. Rather than continue fighting a battle that was destroying everything I cared about, I would walk away, shut down operations temporarily, and rebuild from scratch if necessary. The next morning, I called an all-staff meeting. I explained that due to internal conflicts that were affecting our ability to operate, I would be temporarily suspending operations. I promised that all employees would receive 2 months of severance pay while I sorted things out, and that I hoped to bring them back once the situation was resolved. As I left the office that day, I placed my keys on my desk and walked out unsure if I would ever return to the company I had built from nothing. I turned off my phone, checked into a hotel under a different name, and for the first time in 7 years I completely disconnected from my business. For 5 days I remained off the grid, speaking only with my lawyer as she helped me formulate a plan. On the 6th day I turned my phone back on. Within minutes it began ringing non-stop with calls from employees, clients, and yes, Sophia. I started with the client calls. Globetech was in a panic because progress on their project had completely stalled. The main developer, Jake, had appointed to lead the team, had quit, and no one seemed to know how to proceed. They were threatening to cancel the contract and sue for breach. Next, I listened to messages from my employees. The story they told was dire. Jake had tried to continue running the company in my absence, but without understanding the technical aspects of our work or our internal processes, everything had fallen into chaos. Projects were missing deadlines, clients were furious, and the office environment had become toxic. The most senior developers had already found new jobs, unwilling to deal with the uncertainty. Others were desperately trying to keep things afloat, while Jake made increasingly irrational demands and decisions. Then came the call from Sophia. Her voice was shaky as she spoke a mix of anger and regret. "Victor, everything is falling apart," she said. "Jake has no idea what he is doing. The company is on the verge of collapse. My parents are blaming you for abandoning ship, but I know that is not fair. I am so sorry. I should have stood by you." I listened silently as she continued to apologize, explaining how Jake had manipulated her and her parents, playing on family loyalty while plotting to take control of a successful business he had not helped build. "Can you forgive me?" she asked finally. I told her I needed time to think. The betrayal still felt too fresh, too raw. Over the next few days, I met with my lawyer and a trusted investor who had backed my company in its early days. Together, we devised a strategy. Rather than try to salvage the company in its current state, I would start a new entity with stronger legal protections against exactly this kind of situation. With financial backing secured, I began reaching out to my former employees one by one. I explained my plan and offered them positions in the new company with improved salaries and equity options. Many were eager to join, having seen firsthand the disaster that had unfolded in my absence. One of my first calls was to Globetech. I personally spoke with their CTO, explaining the situation frankly and proposing that we transfer the contract to my new company with a small discount as a gesture of good faith. After some negotiation and a demonstration that I had reassembled most of the original team, they agreed. 2 weeks after I had walked away, my new company was operational, working from temporary office space while we set up a permanent location. Nearly 80% of my original team had joined me, and we were back on track with all major projects. Meanwhile, I heard through industry contacts that the original company was drowning in problems. Jake had tried to salvage the situation by bringing in inexperienced friends to fill vacant positions, but without the core team, they were unable to deliver on commitments. Clients were pulling out, and there were rumors of potential lawsuits. Sophia called again, asking if we could meet. Over coffee at a neutral location, she told me she had moved out of her parents' house and had gotten her own apartment. She admitted that the experience had opened her eyes to how manipulative her family could be, especially Jake. They always treated him as the golden child who could do no wrong, she explained. When your business succeeded where he had failed, I think something snapped in him, and my parents enabled it because they could not accept that you had succeeded without their help or approval. I asked her why she had signed those documents without consulting me first. I trusted my brother, she said simply. That was my mistake. He told me it was just preliminary paperwork to explore options for family involvement that would benefit everyone. I should have read it carefully. I should have talked to you first. As the weeks passed, my new company thrived. Word spread in the industry about what had happened, and surprisingly, it enhanced our reputation. Clients appreciated that we had handled the transition professionally and continued to deliver quality work despite the upheaval. 6 months after the split, my new company was doing even better than the original, with more clients, a stronger team, and a healthier company culture. The old company had effectively ceased operations, unable to recover from the exodus of talent and the loss of major contracts. Jake was facing financial troubles, having taken on debt to keep the failing company afloat. He attempted to sue me for sabotage and client poaching, but my lawyer easily defeated these claims as I had been careful to do everything by the book. Perhaps the most surprising development came when Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds reached out asking for a family dinner to clear the air. They claimed they wanted to make amends, though I suspected their change of heart had more to do with my renewed success than any genuine remorse. Sophia and I attended the dinner, now cautiously working on rebuilding our marriage with the help of counseling. The dinner was tense but civil. Jake did not attend, having apparently moved to another state to pursue a new opportunity. Mr. Reynolds actually apologized, though it felt somewhat forced. I accepted it politely, but made it clear that our relationship would have boundaries going forward. Family was important, but I would never again allow them to interfere in my business or make decisions about my life. In the aftermath of this ordeal, I learned valuable lessons about protecting what I build, even from those who claim to have my best interests at heart. I established clear separation between my personal and professional lives with legal structures to prevent any similar situations in the future. Sophia and I eventually repaired our relationship, though it took time to rebuild the trust. She understood now that her first loyalty needed to be to our partnership, not to her family of origin. I also learned that sometimes walking away is not surrender, but rather a strategic retreat that allows you to rebuild something stronger. By letting go of what I had built, I was able to create something even better, free from the toxic dynamics that had threatened to destroy it. Family does come first, but not as a blank check for exploitation or control. True family supports your dreams without trying to take them over. They celebrate your success without demanding ownership of it. And sometimes the family you choose, like the loyal employees who followed me to the new company, proves more trustworthy than the one you were born into. Have you ever had to walk away from something you built to protect it from people who claimed to be helping you? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Share this with someone who might need to hear that sometimes setting boundaries with family is not just okay, it is necessary. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, rebuilding can be the most powerful form of resilience.